Okay, time to get started. We're going to talk now about the jurisdiction problem. And in order to do that, we need to understand a number of key terms. So let's start with the obvious one. What do I mean when I'm talking about jurisdiction? In a nutshell, jurisdiction is effectively the power to make and enforce laws. Now, the term itself has multiple meanings. We can look at a number of different dictionary definitions, and depending on the context, it has very different meanings. So we can talk about a court's jurisdiction, the kinds of matters that a court can hear or listen to, and we can talk about the jurisdiction that a state has. So in this context, we're going to really talk about the jurisdiction of a state, a nation state. You'll see there are a number of quotes on the slides from Cormier. They are actually taken directly from the readings that you're going to be doing this week. As the slide shows, one of the key kinds of questions that we're asking when we're involved in a jurisdiction problem is really the question of which state or which nation, which laws apply, which state or nation has the power to provide effective legal guidance in a particular area. Guidance is probably the wrong word there. To enforce its law in a particular matter, so subject matter, in relation to certain subject matter, or in a particular place. The next question is effectively which courts exercise their powers or have jurisdiction. So depending on the type of subject matter, for example, the amount of money involved, or whether it's a criminal or a civil matter, so somebody has been accused of an alleged crime, or there is a dispute, a civil dispute between parties. In Australia, different courts will have jurisdiction. So sometimes we're looking at that question, but also in the context of the kinds of legal considerations that we'll be looking at in this course, we might also be asking which countries' courts have the authority to impose an order or a judgment on people involved in a particular matter. And also then what people or entities can be compelled to comply with laws. So to what extent can one nation require people from another nation to do something? So this is particularly interesting this week. I'm aware of a news article where the e-safety commissioner has required a number of social media providers, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Discord and others, to within the next 35 days or 35 days from when the order was made or the documents were served on them, to produce some information about what proactive steps they take to keep children safe on their platforms. So this is, to some extent, could well be a jurisdiction question. While all of the big social media players have a presence in Australia, none of the entities that provide those services are incorporated in Australia. So at risk of using completely non-technical language, when we're talking about the entities, we're talking about corporations which have legal personality. So as far as the law is concerned, they're people, even though they are entities. They don't have beating hearts. An entity, a corporate entity, doesn't even have a physical presence that makes it real. It can change from one building to another in a way that is very difficult for us as humans to change from one body to another. But don't let me get distracted here. So if in a really loose sense we think of a corporation which is created under the laws of a particular place as being a citizen of that place, its headquarters, its boards of directors, the people who make decisions are in that place, again, quite possibly totally oversimplifying here, then one of the questions arises, can the laws of another place require that corporation to do things, and in what circumstances does that apply? So let's think of that as our case study for this week, these particular orders, and we'll talk about that in the tutorial for the purposes of thinking about jurisdiction. So one of the cases that we will look at is the Yahoo case, which goes back to the year 2000. It's a case involving extraterritoriality. Essentially, in that particular matter, Yahoo, which, believe it or not, at the time was a big deal, was effectively showing website pages in France that allowed French people to buy Nazi memorabilia. Now, the trading of Nazi memorabilia was a crime in France, and so a French enforcement agency effectively issued some takedown notices that required Yahoo to stop doing things that would allow Nazi memorabilia to be sold via its platform. And the question became, was in fact Yahoo committing a crime in France? Because it had no physical presence there. While people in France could access those pages, the servers were somewhere else. The activities that were being undertaken were done somewhere else. And the VP at the time, Vice President of Yahoo, Heather Killen, said this: it's very difficult to do business if you have to wake up every day and say, okay, whose laws am I going to follow? We have as many countries and as many laws and just one internet. And that really calls into, or highlights, even though it's an old case, the question for business every day: whose law do I need to follow? And that is, in a nutshell, the jurisdiction question. So over the next couple of videos or podcasts, depending on how you're listening to this, I'm going to look at some key concepts. We're going to go a little bit deeper into jurisdiction and regulation. I want to make sure that you really understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking using the word state. We're going to explore what sovereignty means. We'll go a little bit deeper into what technically I'm talking about when I'm talking about a territory. And we're going to explore some of the extraterritorial principles of jurisdiction. We'll start with jurisdiction and regulation in the next video. Thanks for your time and attention. If you've got questions, concerns, frustrations, you know where to find me. Cheers.